The rain had started just before midnight. Soft at first, gentle enough to sound comforting against the windows. But as the hours passed, the storm grew heavier, and the sound filled every corner of the house Michael once called a home. Now it felt like a place he no longer recognized. Before tonight's story begins, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because the stories shared here are not just about love. They are about the quiet pain people hide behind ordinary smiles. And sometimes, one story can change the way you see your own life. Michael sat alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo hanging above the fireplace. The picture had been taken 12 years earlier on a warm summer evening. Claire had her arms wrapped around him, smiling with the kind of happiness that looked permanent. Back then, he truly believed nothing in the world could pull them apart. But memories often become strangers with time. The room around him was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Every second sounded louder than the last, almost cruel, as if time itself wanted him to feel every moment of her absence. Just 3 hours earlier, Claire had walked out. No screaming. No dramatic argument. No shattered dishes or slammed doors. She had simply packed a suitcase, stood near the front entrance for a few long seconds, and said the words he still couldn't process. I can't do this anymore. That was it. No explanation that made sense. No final conversation worth holding on to. Just a quiet goodbye that somehow hurt more than anger ever could. Michael leaned forward, rubbing his tired face with both hands. His wedding ring still sat on his finger, cold and heavy. He kept staring at it as though removing it would somehow make everything feel real. But he couldn't. Not yet. The house carried traces of Claire everywhere. Her favorite blanket still rested over the couch. A half-read novel remained on the coffee table beside her glasses. Even the faint scent of her perfume still lingered in the hallway. It was strange how someone could leave, yet still feel everywhere. Michael stood slowly and walked into the kitchen. 2 coffee mugs sat beside the sink. He remembered making them that morning. One for him, one for her. A habit he continued even after their conversations became short and distant. Her cup was untouched. The coffee inside had gone cold hours ago. He stared at it for a long moment before pouring it into the sink. The dark liquid disappeared down the drain while a painful thought settled in his chest. Maybe this marriage had been slipping away long before tonight. Maybe he had just refused to see it. He turned off the kitchen light and leaned against the counter, exhausted. For months, he had noticed the distance growing between them. Claire smiled less, talked less, stayed late at work more often. Whenever he asked if something was wrong, she always gave the same answer. I'm just tired. And because he loved her, he chose to believe her. Love sometimes makes people blind in the gentlest ways. Michael walked back into the living room and sat down again. His phone rested on the table beside him, but he ignored it. Friends had called earlier. His brother had texted twice. But Michael didn't know how to explain what had happened when he barely understood it himself. How do you tell people the person you built your entire life around suddenly decided she no longer wanted that life? The thought hollowed him out from the inside. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang. Michael froze. His heart jumped instantly with impossible hope. Claire. Maybe she came back. Maybe she regretted leaving. Maybe she realized 12 years couldn't be abandoned in a single night. The bell rang again. He stood quickly and walked toward the door, his pulse racing harder with every step. But when he opened it, his hope disappeared. Standing there was Evelyn, Claire's mother. She wore a dark gray coat, slightly damp from the rain outside. Her silver hair framed a calm but tired face, and in her hands she carried a small leather bag. For a second, neither of them spoke. Michael expected anger, blame, accusations. Instead, Evelyn looked at him with quiet sadness. Michael, she said softly, may I come in? He stepped aside automatically. The warmth inside the house rushed past her as she entered slowly, removing her coat near the doorway. She looked around the living room carefully, almost as if she could still feel the remains of the life that existed there only hours earlier. Michael closed the door behind her. I didn't expect you, he admitted quietly. I know, Evelyn replied. Her voice carried the calmness of someone who had lived through enough heartbreak to recognize it immediately in others. They sat down across from each other. For several moments, silence filled the room. Then Evelyn finally spoke. She called me before she left. Michael lowered his eyes. The words hurt more than he expected. So you know, he said bitterly. Evelyn nodded gently. Yes. Michael laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. Then you probably also know this is all my fault. Evelyn's expression changed immediately. No, she said firmly. I do not believe that. Michael looked up at her, surprised. He had prepared himself to be judged tonight. Prepared for Claire's mother to defend her daughter and remind him of every mistake he ever made. Instead, Evelyn simply looked at him with understanding. She's confused, Evelyn continued carefully. And sometimes people leave not because they stopped caring, but because they no longer understand themselves. Michael leaned back heavily. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, Evelyn admitted softly. It doesn't. Rain continued tapping against the windows while the clock ticked steadily behind them. For the first time all evening, Michael felt something strange. Not relief. Not comfort. Just the feeling that he no longer had to carry the silence alone. Evelyn studied him for a moment before speaking again. You loved her deeply, didn't you? Michael's throat tightened instantly. Yes, he whispered. More than anything. The confession came out broken. Raw. Honest. He looked down at his trembling hands. I tried, he continued quietly. God, I tried so hard. I worked longer hours so we could have a better life. I kept telling myself things would get better. I thought if I loved her enough, eventually we'd find our way back. His voice cracked near the end. Evelyn listened carefully without interrupting. That alone almost made him emotional. Most people listen just long enough to respond. But Evelyn listened to understand. She stopped talking to me months ago, Michael admitted. Not completely, but enough for me to feel it. Every conversation felt distant, like she was already somewhere else. Evelyn lowered her eyes sadly. She has always struggled with running from difficult emotions, she said quietly, even when she was young. Michael frowned slightly. You knew. A mother notices more than people think. The room grew silent again. Then Evelyn stood and slowly walked into the kitchen. Michael watched her move naturally through the house, opening cabinets without asking, finding mugs, boiling water for tea. It felt strangely comforting, like someone bringing warmth back into a frozen room. A few minutes later, she returned carrying 2 steaming cups. She handed one to Michael before sitting beside him this time instead of across from him. The small gesture somehow mattered more than words. Michael wrapped his hands around the warm mug. I keep thinking about the moment she left, he admitted quietly. I keep wondering if there was something I could have said to stop her. Evelyn looked at him carefully. Sometimes, she said softly, people make decisions long before they speak them out loud. That truth settled heavily in his chest. Deep down he already knew it. The late nights. The emotional distance. The empty conversations. The way Claire stopped looking at him the same way. The signs had always been there. He just loved her too much to accept them. She used to look at me like I was her entire world, Michael whispered. Evelyn smiled sadly. And maybe once you were. Michael closed his eyes briefly. The pain of that sentence nearly broke him. Because hearing once felt worse than hearing never. The storm outside continued growing stronger, but inside the living room, something quieter was happening. 2 people connected by the same loss sat together in shared understanding. Not judgment. Not blame. Just honesty. And for Michael, honesty felt unfamiliar after months of pretending everything was fine. You know what hurts the most? He asked after a while. Evelyn turned toward him. I still love her, he said. Even after tonight. I still do. Evelyn reached over gently and placed her hand over his. There is nothing shameful about loving someone deeply, she said. Her words carried warmth that settled into the emptiness inside him. Michael looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time that evening. There was kindness in Evelyn's face. Strength too. Not loud strength. Quiet strength. The kind built through years of surviving pain without letting it harden your heart. Suddenly, he understood something important. Claire may have inherited her mother's eyes, But she had not inherited her mother's ability to stay when things became difficult. The realization surprised him. And somehow it also made him sad. The clock on the wall showed nearly 2 a.m. Still, neither of them seemed ready for the conversation to end. Because sometimes strangers understand us better than the people closest to us. And sometimes the people who arrive after heartbreak become the ones who quietly help us survive it. Michael stared into his cup of tea while exhaustion finally settled over him. For the first time since Claire left, the crushing pressure in his chest eased slightly. Not because the pain disappeared, but because someone had finally seen it. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Inside the quiet living room, Michael realized something unexpected. Maybe tonight wasn't only the end of his marriage. Maybe it was also the beginning of something he never saw coming.